This is very odd. Trying to get... Hiya, hopefully you guys can hear me. I'm just putting the link to the Google Doc in the side of the screen. And we'll begin in about another minute or so. So I'm going to talk us through this presentation just for the first part, and then we'll move on to a discussion. But again, I'll just leave it another 30 seconds or so before we begin. When you come in, there is a place to introduce yourself in the Google Doc. You can put your name, your email, your school, and if you're on Twitter or you have a blog, you can put it there. Throughout the chat, if you have something to contribute, please use the raise your hand feature. And if you click on participants, you should see a bunch of names on the right. And then below that, you should see an option for raise your hand. And then I'll know that you want to say something instead of everyone unmuting. Okay, it's time to begin, so I'm going to get going. Just in this first part, again, it's just me talking at you guys for a while, and then we'll move to discussion. So the role of the global context to me is something really, really important for the personal project. It's what gives it real value, and it makes it kind of a big, important project. It's what sets it aside to projects that you would do in non-IB schools. And in the project's guide, they're talking about, global context, direct learning towards independent and shared inquiry into our common humanity and shared guardianship of the planet. Using the world as the broadest context for learning, MYP projects can develop meaningful explorations of the global context. So sometimes when we think about personal project, we think, oh, it's just something that you're doing personally, you're working by yourself, and it can just be you improving a skill. Really, the best personal projects have a life that impact other people. So I like to say that the personal project is independent and it's deeply personal, but it does not mean it has to be selfish. It's you as an individual growing and taking ownership over a project, but you're collaborating with others and you are hopefully impacting other people around you. So the kind of word personal project, I think, is sometimes misleading. So there are the 6 global contexts there. And sometimes what happens with students is they just look at the titles and then they kind of make up what those global contexts mean. So they look and they say, oh, globalization, that's all about pollution. Oh, I'm doing a project where I'm making an app. It must be scientific and technical innovation. I'm doing something arty. It must be personal and cultural expression. And that is not always the case. You also find this when students are looking at the learner profile, they just kind of make up what they think communicator or inquirer means, and those can mean different things to all of us. So it's really important to look at the description of the global context or learner profile. So I like to always give them the description and also the explorations, otherwise they make those assumptions. And when you have the explorations, it really, really breaks it down. Whenever I'm writing a unit as well, I'm always looking at the most linked exploration that's going to drive my unit instead of just the global context header. Now, there's 2 big problems I see students having, which I think directly links to global context. Firstly, they'll start their project and they'll say, oh yeah, I guess this is personal and cultural expression. They kind of talk about it as like, oh, I guess if I'm looking at this kind of thing fits on. It should be the steering thing. It should be really what gives the project meaning and should be pushing their learning goal. When they find the global context that fits by looking at exploration, it really can change kind of their view of their project and can help them make meaningful goals. You also have these students who just talk about what they want to make. So I often have students say, I want to make a cookbook. Okay, so why? You want to learn how to publish a book on the computer? No. You want to learn recipes? Yeah, they kind of don't know exactly what they want to learn. but by looking at the global context, they can really steer the idea for their project. And then also they become less tied to the product. So I've had students before who, like, for example, one student I think was making a recipe book all about her grandma's traditional Iranian recipes. And halfway through, she was like, oh, I think I'm actually going to make it a website. I think that will reach more people. And she panicked. She told me, do I have to start over? Do I have to do my proposal? I said, no, the project, the learning that you're doing is exactly the same. The things that you wanted to get out of it are the same. Just the way that you're sharing your learning is slightly different. So even though she changed from cookbook to website, actually the project was not changing that much. Unless she was doing a project where she was really analyzing cookbooks and wanting to learn about the publishing that goes in behind them. Another one that I have as well, which I forgot to put here, is even though I kind of tell kids about the global context all the time, it's in my units in design and they should know about them, I still get students who, when I come to read their final report, they say, so I picked these 3 global contexts, and this year I even had one student who was like, I picked 2 and I made a new one, which is called Scientific and Fairness or something like that. And they kind of mash them together, which we don't want them to do either. So global context can add meaning. It can make the goal more challenging as well. It can widen the goal's impact, and it can help them also connect often service or action to their project as well. So an exercise that I do when I do training, and I apologize if anyone here is from Pathways and NODA, is I get you to think about a project that often you see every year. So for example, my school, every single year, we always have a cookbook. Sometimes we have 3 or 4 cookbooks, but those cookbooks are all vastly different. When I have students approach me and say they want to write a cookbook, I then get them to look at the global context and exploration and pick out exactly what they want to learn and then put that into their goal. So for example, I'm just going to skim through here. They might want to make a cookbook which is focusing on mental health and well-being. So the act of cooking and how that can help you deal with stress, through to food that is natural stress relief. Or if they were doing orientation in space and time, maybe they're going to look at recipes from around the world. Maybe they're going to look at their family's personal family history and see recipes that have been important in their family history. Maybe they'll look at recipes that they can only make with local ingredients. For personal and culture expression, it could be about actual food photography and making the most beautiful cookbook. It could be about making illustrations for the cookbook. For globalization and sustainability, it could be about making a cookbook that has the least impact on the environment. And for fairness and development, they could be making one which, let me have a think. They could be doing an event which they cook food for local refugee families based on recipes from the country they come from, and it raises money for a refugee charity. So that could be looking at inequality, difference, and inclusion. I'm just going fast so we can get to the discussion. I put a few different examples here, one for each of the global contexts. I have, how can I create a cookbook which not only benefits people's physical health, but mental health too? How can I create a cookbook for local refugees, which include recipes from my culture and theirs? How can I create a beautiful wordless cookbook, which is easy for anyone to follow? How can I create a cookbook for children, which helps them build both mathematical and cooking skills? How can I create a cookbook with only local ingredients in the recipes to reduce negative impact on our local environment? And how can I create a cookbook of healthy but affordable recipes for those living below the poverty line? So I wrote those while looking at each of those global context pages. I also try and get my students to phrase their goal originally as a question, because then if they do change their product, they don't mind so much. That instead of saying, I will make a cookbook or I will make this, having it as a question allows them to make changes. So I'm just going to go back to our original document just to see if anyone has put any burning questions. We've got no burning questions yet. I'm going to do stop sharing. And let me see, has anyone got anything they want to share so far or any questions? Please raise your hand in the side. Anusha, is your hand raised? Right. I'm wondering if anyone has wants to share how they tell kids about the global context and personal projects in their school, or how they really help those students make meaningful connections. Because it is something they struggle with. It comes up 3 times in the report, like it's worded 3 times in 3 different strands, but really it should be kind of present throughout the report. Anyone have anything to contribute or any questions? You can add in the chat on the side. Okay, I'm going to share with you then.
Sorry, Lenny. Sorry, I couldn't get the unmute to come up. Sorry. Sorry, could you repeat your question? Sorry.
I'm asking if anyone else has any either questions or if they want to share how they teach children about global context in their school, especially in relation to personal project.
I agree with what you just said, that I find this the hardest bit. We've slowed right down in terms of how we start the personal project. We used to sort of get into it quite quickly and get up and running with the passion piece, like what are you interested in? And I found, like you, it was the global context always came at the end, and I've done all this stuff. Oh, and by the way, it tacks on to scientific and technical innovation. We've spent quite a bit of time now with like smaller lead-in sessions with the previous cohort, sort of talking to the next cohort coming in about why they found it difficult halfway through, why they lost track of where they're going, and we do some examples. I get staff in to talk about things that they've done outside of school that might be like aligned to personal project, and the kids get to ask them questions about, okay, if you were thinking about what you were doing through this lens, how might you have changed it? And I think hearing the teachers talk about how they might have taken their projects and changed them slightly that sort of gives them an idea of, oh, we could take it in that way, we could take it in that way. And then they spend some time really sort of engaging with each of the global contexts and sort of getting rid of them as they gradually. Sorry, I'm not making much sense. It's 2:00 in the morning.
Oh, sorry.
That's right. They're not making. So they gradually get rid of the ones that don't feel right until they sort of settle on one that feels right for them.
So I wonder if we could do something as similar, not just with teachers and former PP students talking about the global context, but even get them to think about things that they're passionate about. Like it could be anything. Like some of my kids are passionate about trainer design, and say, okay, what is it about that? And then have a look at it. Or how could you learn more about trainers through looking at these different lenses? I have done things before where at the beginning of the project I had like a whole inspiration slideshow, and it's a bunch of videos and a bunch of articles, and they all have global context linked. And I've also done in my last school, not in my current school, like a boot camp for 2 days, which is run by the grade 10s for grade 9 at the end of the year. And I always dedicate one whole session to global context. I feel like no matter how much I do, I still get kids who think of it as an add-on or kind of merge to global context or aren't getting how important it is. So that's kind of my struggle. But maybe no school gets it perfect. I don't know.
Hi, Lenny. Sorry, can I jump in?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I think one is that we do focus a little bit on the exploration. It really helps students to decide their global context per se. And before that, one of the start points that we do is play the why game. So they put on the thinking hats, and every question we kind of fire at them, they have to tell us why. So I want to do this. Why do you want to do this? Because I think this will be great for me. Why do you think this will be great for you?
Nice.
Because I think this is my hobby. Why do you think of all the hobbies you want to go? So it is just, keep firing the why to them till the time they run out of the answers. The students who run out of the answer earlier are the students who know this is not the kind of project they want to take because they got stuck in the first or second round. Students who have very clear thinking are able to go through this in the longer run, and that sorts a lot of dilemma for the student exactly what they want.
I really like that, especially because sometimes I get students who they're just thinking about, what is it? So they just think cookbook, building a PC. They don't think that it could be it's not something that just has to happen in school and have an exhibition in the hall at the end of the year. They forget that it can be about anything, right? So I really like that as a project. I wonder if I could get kids to do like come up with their initial ideas and then work in partners and do like 3-minute interviews and keep harassing each other like why until they run out of ideas. I think that's definitely good. I do get them to do a long proposal fairly early on, which includes the global context and why, and the exploration. I just saw that somebody in the chat asked about the exploration, saying, do we talk about it in the report? I get them to talk about it when they're talking about choosing the global context. Otherwise, that first strand becomes why, what their project is, why it's challenging personal interest, and then a sentence about global context. So getting them to talk about the exploration really, really helps. It's not a requirement, but I think it definitely helps. Same with unit planning. It's not a requirement, but I always do it. We talked about, someone asked about unpacking the global context as well, and I definitely do that through global context, through exploration. I have done things before where I like cut up the explorations and they have to match them to the global context. It just depends how much time you have. So I'm going to have a look in the chat about some more. Yeah, view the goal from the standpoint of each global context. So if they have a rough goal, get them to think about it in each global context, just like how I did with the cookbook. I think that will help them as well. Nobody has their hand raised, but I'm seeing some nice questions coming up. The 5 why technique, I like that. Something that I get my students to do as well, not always in personal project, but definitely in design, is I get them to think about why something matters to them, to their local community, which could be the school, and then why does it matter to the world or outside of that. And that also helps them to pick a global context. When we're thinking about their initial goals as well, and they just say, I want to make a cookbook, when they pick their global context, especially with exploration, it helps them make it more challenging. So it helps them realize, oh, okay, well, I could also teach people to cook, or I could also raise money for this charity, or I could also look at the impact on the environment of my recipes. So I think it definitely helps with that part as well. So I think really the key to a great personal project and a great report, unfortunately, is picking this global context and making sure it's the right one. Anyone else have anything to add, to share, anything that you guys do with your kids to help them to pick a perfect global context? What I can do then, oh, Ariana, let me unmute you. There you go. Ariana?
Okay. Hello, sorry.
Okay.
I wanted to say that I usually make students analyze between 2 global contexts and see which one fits best with their idea. The moment that they analyze between the 2, then they can easier understand which one fits more, but also how deep they want to go into. Because sometimes they their first choice is personal and cultural expression because of their personal choices, but it doesn't always fit. So when we choose another one, maybe elaborate this one and maybe elaborate that one, then they can deeply see how far and how well the global context fits with their project.
I think that's good. And then also kind of doing the flip side of that, having students decide their global context and write their goal, and then maybe getting other people to guess what the global context is. I think that comes really well too. I do try and get, sorry, go ahead.
And another thing is trying to encourage them on how they will use what they're doing, their project, later on in life. For example, I try to explain how they can take this project that they're working on, MIP5, into either services action, DP, or something as an extended essay on DP. So giving them the idea that they have to go through this in DP and perhaps take the initial idea for the personal project and extend it later on, it gives them a deeper perspective and a better perspective of what they want to do, especially in the seriousness of choosing the topic that they want to work on.
Mm-hmm. I think thinking about the life after the personal project, that's why I always say to my students, you know, your project could be like a work of art, it could be unfinished, right? It could be something that you continue forever, it could turn into a business. Your report is kind of the deadline that needs to be finished then. I have some nice examples actually of students who have taken their personal project beyond the MYP. So I've had one student who learnt Japanese and she made a children's book to teach other people Japanese, and she ended up going to Japan that summer for an internship. I had a student who, this is my favorite personal project ever, he made an app which he called Food Flip, and it was like Uber. So at the end of the day, these local businesses would say how much food they had left over, and then this food bank would come and collect the food. And he actually got people like Whole Foods and lots of big restaurants to work with him, and he fed a lot of people in the Atlanta food bank. And that was a nice one because a lot of students say, well, obviously that's scientific and technical innovation. He coded that all, he made the app, he did the splash page, the artwork, and actually he used to come and talk to the students about how he actually was looking at fairness and development. So I thought that was a really nice one. Definitely the personal project should be something that can exist further. It shouldn't be something that's wrapped up in the nice to go, right? Like, your learning doesn't finish after a certain amount of months. Do we have any hands raised? But I'm just going to try and read some of these questions. So someone's talking about unpacking the global context with the explorations. For me, that's the best way. They are all possible explorations. So you could also pick apart those words and pick apart the things there and say, okay, what are other ways that we could explore the global context? For me, like, I always just choose the ones that exist, but that is a great way to add extra meaning to the global context. Someone asked, are we rolling out PP online? I was just going to get a link to share with you. It is, basically I started making this document in case we do have to roll it out online. What I intend to do alongside this document is also I'll do, like, I don't use Zoom, I use Microsoft Teams with my students, and hopefully that will help as well. But this is like a rolling document they will use regardless of if we're online. I put it in the Google Doc in the chat. Oh no, I put it in the chat to everyone. Give me a second. This guides them through every single strand. For each strand it has what are 1 to 2, 3 to 4, 5 to 6, 7 to 8, what the descriptor is, but also the task-specific clarification, which is from the further guidance document. It also has the command terms. Then it has possible things they could have in the process journal and possible questions they might want to answer. Answering those questions, that could be the basis of their report. This is an unfinished document, and I've made it so anyone can comment. So if you have any suggestions, please put them on there. What I'm envisioning doing is, although I like to do like a little boot camp, which is kind of student run, is I will do a series of videos leading up to them writing their proposal. So I'll do one about what is the personal project. You know, there's a report at the end and how many words, etc. Then one all about global context, and then like a general inspiration one, which will have examples of previous projects. It will have the UN global goals. It will have all stuff like that, and then I'm going to get them to do their proposal. One of the things that most schools do, I guess, and my school does also do, is we start at the end of grade 9. However, I just kind of like them to have their topic or their goal and then do some research over the summer, and then we kind of kick off properly. That's because we often have like 10 new kids joining in August, but don't want to make it unfair to them. I think after this year, so after next year, when we have the new personal project, which is much shorter and has half the word count, I think I will get everyone to start in August. I will tell them they can research into a topic over the summer, but that will be it. Because I think that will make it a little bit fairer. It means, for me, it makes it easier for having supervisors, because so many people will leave and come, right? And I think it'd be good for all those new students. Although we're talking mostly about global context, if anyone has any ideas for moving online or kicking things off online, please do raise your hand and share. I see Peter, you've got your hand raised. I've unmuted you.
Yeah, thanks, Ellie. Just a couple of things there with the it's difficult. We tend to find the kids can be more creative when they're not doing digital projects. They tend to get lost in the digital world. because when you tell about like what are you interested in, like what are you, where's your passion, they sometimes struggle when when their passion is, say, YouTube, and they can't define what it is that they're actually passionate about. I just wanted to ask about the new guide coming out. So this year, starting in August to run to the next August, that's still the old guide, and then from 21 is the new guide, right?
I think they originally were going to try and start it this year, but it is the year after. There's good things and bad things about it. I think it's shorter, which will help lots of our children. There's a little bit more flexibility in there. For me, I really like the current personal project. I think it's a good standard to set for schools, especially schools that are not doing e-assessment, because it makes schools, focus on global context and other things like that. The global context isn't in the new one. There's also choice for ATLs to reflect on. Ideally, every kid will be reflecting on research skills, but maybe they'll just choose communication skills and thinking skills. We don't know yet. We'll see how it goes when it rolls out. Yeah, there's definitely things that are good and bad about it.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah. Let me see if we have any hands raised. Somebody else was asking about virtual PP exhibition. We didn't have our exhibition before we broke up. I have seen students schools that are doing it on Instagram, making a whole Instagram account where they're putting little videos and photographs. I'm in Germany, so we have very, very strict GDPR laws, so we can't really put student names or any images online. So I don't know how it would work for us. Maybe we would have an exhibition that only teachers and students can go, and we could do some of it through Flipgrid or somewhere else that can kind of be a little bit more closed. And then we can have images of student work without names on somewhere like Instagram or on Google Slides, but it is very tricky, especially with GDPR. Anyone here want to share if they're doing an online personal project exhibition? Oh, I see, Smita, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, Lenny. So I just wanted to talk about a common problem which occurs when students, they do a lot all along their PP journey, but they are unable to capture it in their PP report. Mm-hmm. And this is a question that I want to ask everyone around. When is it that they start emphasizing on the report? Do they do the personal project report simultaneously as they delve into each criteria? Or is it something that they leave for later? Because a lot of students, especially in the month of December, January, we're in such a rush because we have to upload all these reports, and the students have just lost their way through this. They've actually done a lot, but it somehow doesn't reflect. And a little while ago, you mentioned about how even the global context comes into the report at various, objectives. So I just wanted to ask, how do the schools deal with this?
So one thing that I do is I am very strict about them doing one draft, which they get feedback on, and only and then they do their final report. It is in the guide. It's not like concrete in the guide. It's like suggested, but I think that's the fairest way. What I do is I show them everything up front, so they know exactly what the report will look like. They can see examples of the process journals. They can see everything. Some kids are not going to look at that, but what I do is I have some mini deadlines in the year. So I'll have like a mini deadline for summer reflection, which then they can use for Criterion A Strand 1. I have a mini deadline for a source evaluation, which they can use for Criterion A Strand 3. I have them upload like a research or action plan, which they can use in Criterion B. So I get them to do all these things, and then when they come to introduce the report and talk about it, I'm like, oh, look, you've already done X, Y, and Z. This document that I shared in the chat now, that I'm actually going to give it to them and try and work more alongside that. So then they actually not only have potential process journal entry for every single strand, but they've already answered some of those reflection questions, and then when they come, that will almost act like a first draft that's not going to get graded, and then they'll just turn that into their report, and I think that will help a lot. Peter, do you have an idea as well?
Yeah, so I was going to say exactly the same as you. We do the same thing. We have the mini deadlines where they have to show that they're keeping up with the project, but the idea is it builds into their report as they go along. So we have like 5-6 key deadlines throughout the project. And then we always go back to the ATLs of planning. So this is why we're doing this thing. We're doing this when you want to learn anything, you do need to plan, and you need to set yourself mini goals. We've also explored doing it like not so much on the written report. We've done more of the blogging and the recording audio, which I think if they do that along the way, it's easier for them to come back and listen to themselves speak. Or if they do a flip grid along the way, it's easier for them to watch themselves back and go, oh yeah, like I did that. So I was just going to echo what you said, Lenny.
I'm just putting a link into the chat. It's a TED talk that I use with all my kids called Inside the Mind of the Procrastinator. It's really funny, and I showed that at the beginning. And it's all about how, you know, those people who seem like they're really efficient and always on top of stuff doesn't necessarily mean they are. They might just be working to the deadline. And so you need to set yourself small deadlines in here, because otherwise you're going to prioritize everything else. And then when it comes to writing your report, you're going to try and do your report and your purchase journal entry, and you'll put it all at once and you can't do it. I really recommend watching that video and showing it to the students, because it's hilarious and it makes them think about why they need to set goals. Anisha? I'm not sure. Jinsey? Yeah, I think there's a connection issue there. Sometimes I do get students who still will give me, when they come to write the report and talk about the action plan will just be the deadlines that I have given them. They don't think about actually the deadlines for their own project. That's something they need to focus on as well. Jinsey? I think she's still having connection issues. Somebody asked about criterion A, selecting a goal, keeping in mind the global context. How do we differentiate between 6-7 level and personal project? I would say for grading, the thing that's helped me the most for any strand is that further guidance document. I did put on my blog, and if you go to my blog and type in personal project, it'll be the most recent thing. It is my new grading document, which has the all the information from further guidance alongside the criteria, and that really, really helps. Some of the things where people get stuck with grading is like criterion A, when a student describes why it is challenging. As long as they describe exactly why it's challenging, you don't have, if you think it's not challenging, it doesn't really matter. The global context, I would say, really, really showing that it's driving the project. For me, that's going to be a good personal project. But again, strand 1 in criterion A is so hard because it's like 4 things all in once, right? There's quite a few that are like that, where it's actually asking you personal interest, the goal, why is the goal challenging, global context. I see someone's cute kid in pajamas in the background and it's really distracting. Yeah, so I think that is one of the good things about this new personal project. It doesn't have like a strand that has like 10 kind of strands hidden inside. We have about 6 minutes before it's going to cut out. I do have another session later in the week, which is about helping students set highly challenging goals. So I'll touch on global context, and then I'll talk about all the other parts of that as well. Does anyone else have any last minute questions or things they want to share? Can you throw some light on transfer of skills and how students can I would say this is the part that students struggle with, especially criterion A, strand 2, where they're talking about subject specific knowledge. And then when they come to write criterion D, strand 2, talking about new knowledge and understanding. I think for that first one, they need to talk about not just school, so you need to talk about the topic that they're doing, what they know about that topic already, and then also what they have learned about that topic, or skills that can help them with personal project at school. So they might say, well, I've never made a cookbook in school. Yeah, but maybe you've learned how to find royalty-free images, or maybe you've learned how to use persuasive text, which you're going to use to make your food sound appetizing. And then for when we come to the bottom, we're talking about knowledge and understanding that they've gained. I think the last 2 strands, students find it really hard to not write it really superficially, especially the learner profile one, but also the knowledge and understanding one. I recommend the students really listing out some of the things that they have gained, things they didn't know before. And if they've got a strong bit where they're talking about prior learning, that's going to help them write that strand about the new knowledge they've gained. Someone is asking for the link to the TED talk. I think for some reason I keep sending all these messages that's supposed to be to everyone, just to one person. So here is the link to the video. Priya, go ahead.
Yeah, hello. I just wanted some clarity on criterion B, strand 3, which is about self-management. And in self-management, in the further guidance to projects, when we look at the strands, the detailed specifications for 7 and 8, it clearly says effective time and task management. So what exactly is the difference between time and task management is what I wanted to know.
Well, firstly, for that strand as well, I'm not sure if it's in further guidance, but every year the feedback that comes to coordinators is that students just talk about time management too much, and they're not talking about like effective skills and those other sorts of self-management skills. I guess for time management, that could be to do with juggling all the other things that they're doing in school and their social life. And then task management would be how exactly did they lay out what they had to do to complete their documentary? How do they know when to interview someone? How do they know? It's all those different elements that make up their project. That's how I would see it. For me, the personal project really closely links to design. And so in design, they have to make a logical plan, which is step by step and also includes tools, materials, and the timings for everything. So to me, that would be more the task, because it's about the specific thing they're making or the specific thing they're doing or the specific learning. And then the time management part would be how they're doing that in relation to everything else they have to do. But I'm not an expert.
No,
Anyone?
but I think it has given a little bit of clarity. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Cool. Anyone else have an idea for the difference between time management and task specific management? Okay. Someone said sometimes students fail to talk about the difference between critical thinking and creative thinking. I always give students the link to I have a spreadsheet that has all of the little skill indicators that the IB give us, which are also not required by the IB. They're just to kind of break it down. Because also, if you just say, talk about your thinking, students are like, what? Like, they know they've been thinking, obviously they've been thinking, but to articulate it is very hard. Whereas when they look at the breakdown, they say, oh, okay, so critical thinking is evaluating risk. Yes, I did that. Or creative thinking is making something new. Yes, I did that. So giving them the breakdown really, really helps. Because if you say to someone, describe your thinking today, it sounds so abstract to them. It's very, very hard. This is one thing I like about the new personal project, is that they pick the ATLs they want to talk about. Again, it doesn't have research as a requirement, but I'm hoping that everyone will have a bibliography and everyone has done some research. Like in theory, you have used all your ATL skills, all those big 5 or even the 10 categories, but it's just going to be the ones that students choose to speak about. As much as I like them reflecting on all of them in the current personal project, I think sometimes having to do all 5 and some of the way that the project is laid out is a bit jumping through hoops and becomes a bit superficial. So Smita says, yes, the indicators are useful for critical and creative thinking. Same with self-management. So I get them to say, not just time management, make sure not only you're not doing just time management, but make sure you're not just doing organizational skills. Make sure you're also talking about those other skills. So having it broken down by those 10 areas really helps them as well. So we have less than a minute left. So thank you so much for everyone who came. Hopefully this was useful. The Google Doc is there. I have lots more resources in my blog, and you can always email me and reach out with other questions. So thank you so much for coming, for contributing, for watching, for sharing ideas. Okay, bye.